The modern vision of a pirate is one of relentless action, swashbuckling explorers seeking constant adventure, planks and parrots and treasure, men and women taking what they want from who they want, whenever they want. Whilst there is no doubt some truth behind this notion, the reality in most cases is likely very different. Take the focus of our story today, for example. One of the most famed pirates to have sailed the seven seas. His legend laced with stories of incredible escapades, rigged trials, executions, even some long-lost hidden treasure. But was this really the life he lived? Can it really have been as dramatic as the legends suggest? Hoist the sails and batten down the hatches, my friends, as we reveal the truth behind the legend of the renowned accidental pirate, Captain Kidd. Our story begins in Scotland with a young boy named William Kidd, who grew up in a town by the sea. Much of his childhood was spent watching the ships and dreaming of the bold adventures that lay beyond the blue horizon. Little did this boy know, however, that the story he was about to write would be told for centuries to come, and that his name would go down in history as one of the most infamous pirates to have ever lived. As he grew, so did his love for the ocean, and it wasn't long before he left Scotland behind, taking apprentice roles on any ship he could and sailing across the vast waters of the world. He honed his skills, learning everything there was to know about sailing and life at sea. Our story picks up several years later, William Kidd by now a member of a pirate crew operating in the Caribbean. Few details are known as to exactly how or why, but a mutiny took place and the ship's existing captain was ousted. By this time, Kidd was an experienced sailor, and whether by vote or decree, he was declared the captain. He sailed with his new crew to the British colony of Nevis, where the ship was renamed the Blessed William, and the legend of Captain Kidd was officially born. The backdrop to Kidd's entire story was the ongoing war between England and France that had spilled into the Caribbean waters. As such, the British governor of Nevis recruited Captain Kidd and his new ship to defend the colony from the French. As was common in these times, no payment was offered, but instead an understanding that any plunder from victories against the French could be kept. Kidd and his men attacked a nearby French island and were successful in destroying the town, looting around £2,000 sterling. Shortly after this victory, Kidd and his crew joined the British Navy in a battle against the French. But his crew were not pleased, as there was no treasure to steal on the enemy warships. Kidd pleaded that it was their duty as allies of the British Navy, but his largely pirate crew were unmoved. They often say, what comes around goes around, and just as he had himself led a mutiny to obtain his position and his ship, it was now his turn to be deposed. As he rowed ashore, his crew, led by the notorious pirate Robert Culliford, stole the anchored ship and his £2,000 fortune, sailing off into the sunset. The governor of Nevis granted him another ship and left him to hunt down his disloyal crew. Whilst out at sea, however, Captain Kidd decided to change course and instead headed for New York, which was in open revolt against the British. Still at this point, Kidd retained a sense of loyalty to the crown, and he lent his aid to the British forces. His reputation grew, and he settled in New York, marrying Sarah Bradley Cox-Ort, a widowed Englishwoman who had inherited a vast fortune from her first marriage. Whilst in the city, he mingled with many nobles and high-ranking officials. Power and wealth now his, courtesy of his wife and the significant reputation he had built as a leader and a sailor. For many, this life would have been enough. He had legitimacy, no reputation for piracy, and all the comfort he could have desired. But not for Captain Kidd, who once more felt that longing, the pull of the deep blue waters. Several years later, he was approached by the Earl of Bellomont, now Governor of New York and well known to Kidd, with an opportunity to return to the sea. Tasked by the king to rid the seas of the pirate scourge, the Earl presented Captain Kidd with exactly the justification he had been looking for. To not only get back on board a ship, but let loose his seemingly natural pirate tendencies, albeit under the guise of legitimacy. The expedition was backed by many prominent British nobles, including King William III himself. A new ship was commissioned, the Adventure Galley, and was a sight to behold. 34 cannons and 150 men, additional oars providing extra speed and mobility that was a key advantage in naval warfare. Kidd took great pride in selecting a formidable crew, but an unfortunate incident with the British Navy involving ignored pleasantries and disrespectful backside salutes led to many of his hand-picked men being forcibly drafted into the Royal Navy and stripped from his voyage. He was forced to recruit replacements in New York, the majority of which were hardened criminals, some no doubt former pirates. His mission was clear: remove the pirate threat to British shipping channels, as well as attacking ships of enemy countries such as France, Portugal, and Spain, whilst leaving English ships alone. As before, any loot he captured he was free to keep. Think of it as legalised and targeted piracy, but under the banner of the British Empire. He sailed to Madagascar, a hotbed of pirate activity, but whilst Kidd had the best intentions to follow the scope of the mission, his newly formed crew had no such moral delusions and were intent on attacking any ship, English or otherwise. Kidd resisted this, failing to attack several ships when he had the chance, leading to some of the crew abandoning him. To make matters worse, he struggled to find the pirates he had come to hunt, and things started to spiral out of control. A heated debate with one crew member, William Moore, who was frustrated at Kidd's reluctance to attack, ended in violence, as an enraged Captain Kidd struck him across the head with an iron bucket, the injury killing him within a day. A moment of passion that at the time did little to ease the pressure from the crew, but more significantly would come back to haunt him in the not-so-distant future. Costs increasing, crew morale at rock bottom, his hand was forced, and when they came across the 400-ton Indian treasure ship, the Quedagh merchant, Kidd reluctantly attacked, desperate to retain the fragile loyalty of his men. The ship was easily taken, and was a truly enormous catch, stocked full of gold, silver, and extremely valuable goods. However, upon boarding the ship, he discovered the captain was an Englishman, sailing on behalf of the East India Trading Company. Captain Kidd was immediately anxious and attempted to convince his crew to release their prisoners and abandon their prize. They refused, however, and upon discovery that the English captain had French passes that granted the protection of the French Navy for their voyage, were able to persuade Kidd that this was evidence enough the ship could be considered French and therefore fair game for them to attack. His command over the crew already on a knife edge, Kidd reluctantly agreed, and they kept their trophy, renaming the ship the Adventure Prize. But when word reached England, the news was not received well. The furious and highly influential East India Trading Company put pressure on the king to denounce Kidd as a pirate, and orders were quickly given to British forces to hunt and capture the now rogue sailor. Captain Kidd navigated to Madagascar and there was reunited with Robert Culliford, the pirate that had stolen his first command. Whilst accounts differ as to the nature of their meeting, most suggest that Kidd ordered his men to attack Culliford as revenge for the earlier slight. His men refused, however, sick of his perceived weakness, all but 13 abandoning him and instead joining Culliford. Forsaking the heavily damaged Adventure galley, he took off with his few remaining loyal men in the Adventure prize. Hearing news that he was now considered a pirate and being actively hunted, he decided to hide the treasure ship in a lagoon on the small island of Santa Catalina. Here he received word from his ally and backer, the Earl of Bellomont, to meet him in New York with promises of clemency. Leaving his prize, he travelled to New York on a smaller ship, hiding a portion of his treasure on Gardiner's Island en route, hoping to use its location as a bargaining chip if needed. But when he arrived in New York, instead of finding a friend and forgiveness as promised, he was arrested and thrown into jail. Terrified of being implicated in piracy himself, Bellomont had betrayed him. After a year in a hellish prison, where only his battle-hardened constitution kept him alive, he was transported to England for trial. It was only here he learned that he was to be tried for both piracy and the murder of William Moore. Captain Kidd pleaded his innocence repeatedly, desperately claiming that he had never attacked English vessels and had only been carrying out the commission given to him by the very people now keeping him detained. Key evidence such as the French passes obtained from his greatest prize were mysteriously missing, and questionable testimonies on the accusation of murder given against him by 2 former crew members in exchange for pardons saw to his swift conviction on all charges. Terrified of their own implication in piracy and embarrassed by their connection to his name, the nobles that had previously funded and supported him now abandoned him and were key in ensuring his conviction in the controversial trial. He was hanged shortly after, although even that was not a straightforward affair, the first rope snapping and breaking. He survived, and although some of the crowd called this a sign from God that he should be released, he was quickly hanged again, this time successfully. His body was strung up above the River Thames for 3 years, a warning to future pirates. Whilst he died still protesting his innocence, determined to not be branded with the pirate tag, he is nevertheless known to this day as one of the most famous pirates to have ever lived, partly due to his adventures in the Caribbean and his fearsome reputation as a captain in combat, but also the persistent legend of his mystery-buried treasure. For you see, whilst the man himself had been captured and executed, his treasure ship remained at large, as well as the stolen gold and valuables it contained. As time passed and they went longer without discovery, the legend grew into myth and became, as these things so often do, larger than life. Countless expeditions over the next several centuries were mounted to locate the elusive treasure of Captain Kidd, but all were in vain. It was not until 2007 that the wreckage of the Adventure prize was located in shallow waters off the Dominican Republic. The treasure, however, was long since gone. A fascinating story that shows how easily a legend can grow, whether desired or not. It would be interesting to know what Captain Kidd would think of his modern depiction as a fearsome pirate. No doubt his life ticked many of the boxes: epic naval warfare, mutinies, plunder and treasure, murder, a tragic death even. But perhaps not quite in the way you would expect. A fitting title then, maybe, The Accidental Pirate. However you view him, there is no doubt that he created an incredible story across the course of his life and cemented his place in history forever. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, it would be great if you could give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Remember to make sure you hit the bell when you subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Please let me know in the comments your thoughts on the story, or let me know any other great stories you would like to see told in future videos. Thanks again for watching.